It was a big bummer for me, and without a doubt, in a whole season that was fantastic, with a show that was so good, with a season of television that's some of the best Star Wars of all time, I just can't believe and can't understand why they would recast a character that people love so much. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks so much for clicking here on another video. And today's a special one because we're talking about Star Wars, which you guys already know is my favorite thing of all time. But what makes this even more special is the kind folks over at Disney and Lucasfilm didn't only send me the first few episodes early of the last season, the second season of Andor, but they sent me the entire season. So today we're going to be talking about it. No spoilers, just giving my thoughts ahead of the release of the 3-episode premiere, which as of uploading this when the embargo lifts is tomorrow night. So definitely get tuned on Disney Plus and get ready for Andor season 2, because today we're going to be talking about some of the best Star Wars to be on screens in modern day. And so without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on season 2, the final season of Andor. Once again, coming from the mind of Tony Gilroy and many others, this show once again, of course, stars people like Diego Luna, Stellan Skarsgard, Denise Gough, Genevieve O'Reilly, and many more, and has some familiar faces that return like Alan Tudyk, Ben Mendelsohn, Forrest Whitaker, and many more. This is a show I was incredibly excited to get back to because I said it in my review for the first season. When they first announced it, I thought to myself, okay, why are we doing this? We already know what happens to Cassian Andor, the title character played by Diego Luna in Rogue One. That movie is a flat-out Suicide Squad movie. If you've seen that movie, you know how it ends. And so we already know where the journey is going for this character. So I was thinking to myself when they first announced it, what really can they do to make this show stand out? Then that first season came out, and while some people thought it was too slow, I loved that show. I found it to be easily some of the best storytelling done in modern day Star Wars, and I love the fact that we have things that are more pulpy and a little bit more sci-fi-esque when it comes down to Star Wars stuff. But I also love that now Andor exists, where you still have all those Star Wars elements, but it feels a lot more grounded. In a lot of ways, it feels like an HBO series of more mature storytelling of Star Wars. And so coming out of that first season, I was high on the show, absolutely loved it, and I was excited to get back into it. And I really appreciate that they had a vision for what this show was going to be right out of the gate. They announced that it was going to be a 2-season show. And for the most part, Star Wars has usually been pretty good about that. They don't really overstay their welcome with certain shows going for many seasons. They've all run a specific amount of episodes, a specific amount of seasons, and then they move on. And then, you know, they'll give us other stories that will maybe continue on certain storylines or have characters return and other things. But Andor has its, you know, really tight storyline of 2 seasons to really set up the events of Rogue One, while also telling a compelling story in and of itself. And also, most notably, showcasing the rebellion and the struggles to get the rebellion going. You know, we've seen shows like Star Wars Rebels, we've had books, we've had comics that expand upon this, but a lot of times mainly focus on the hero characters. And I think what makes Cassian a great character in Rogue One is that he is this gray area of the rebellion, this individual who does what needs to be done in order for the rebellion to continue to succeed. But that movie really showcases the dark side to the rebellion, and I think this series as well kind of doubles down on that and just allows you as a viewer to see those gray areas to get a rebellion going. Who are the individuals who are willing to sacrifice it all, including their morality and their ethics, in order to make sure that the heroes are able to get things done, or the people at the front lines, or the senators, the people that they think of when it comes down to the rebellion? Who are those boots on the ground people making those tough calls? And I think that this show and Rogue One have done an incredible job of kind of showcasing a side of Star Wars that you typically don't see on screen. With all that said, jumping back into this season was fantastic. Immediately, you jump in 1 year after the events of the original season, and over the course of the show, every few episodes, we jump 1 year closer to the events of Rogue One. And so immediately you're jumping into a different place for all these characters. Some time has passed, especially with where the first season ended, and we get to kind of jump into where their lives are now, who's still struggling from the events of the previous season. You know, you have certain characters in hiding like Cassian and the gang around him, and then you have other characters who are in better positions in their life, specifically some of the Imperial characters, and we're going to get into them in just a little bit. And a big part of this season that I think a lot of Star Wars fans are going to be excited for is the Gorman element of this. If you've never really paid attention to some of the little details of Star Wars, then Gorman might be new to you. You may not know what that is, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody in terms terms of people going into this, just kind of watching this as a Star Wars show without all the details. But if you were a longtime Star Wars fan, there is a specific incident around Gorman that has been mentioned over the course of many pieces of Star Wars media at this point that we do get to finally see in this show. It's something that we've heard about, it's something that's been mentioned in lines of dialogue, but it's never been something that we've actually fully seen on screen, and this show dives into that event in Gorman. So if you are a fan of Star Wars and you know what I'm talking about, get ready to see that Gorman incident here in this show. And I think that that was definitely one of the best parts of the show. They've already talked about it in kind of publicly, which is the reason I mentioned it, that Gorman would be a part of this season. Tony Gilroy, I think, in my opinion, has given away a little bit too much about that for people who are not as attuned to Star Wars. But yeah, it was great to see Gorman be a part here. And as I mentioned before, you have some other faces as we're kind of getting closer to Rogue One that have to appear here. Ben Mendelsohn returns as the character of director Orson Krennic, of course, who is behind the creation of the Death Star, or at least leading the charge. They do make a lot of references to the characters that we'll start to see in Rogue One as time goes on. Of course, K2SO, played by Alan Tudyk, had to make an appearance here as well as we get closer to Rogue One. It was great to see him in the season. I'm going to give a couple more thoughts on some of these characters in just a little bit, but it was nice to kind of see some of those pieces kind of connect to Rogue One a little bit closer. You also have a bunch of Rebellion characters and some of the individuals, some of the senators that you see in Rogue One starting to make appearances here as well. I won't spoil who exactly, but if you've seen Rogue One, expect to see a lot of familiar faces of those individuals who are on Yavin 4 leading up to the events of Rogue One. And then you also have characters like Forrest Whitaker returning as Saw Gerrera, which was great to see once again. He was in the first season as well, but it was great to see him here once again as we kind of get closer to the events of Rogue One in this show every few episodes. When it comes down to our title character, Cassian Andor, Diego Luna is just phenomenal in this role. He was great in the first season, he was great in Rogue One, but here he really does an incredible job to give this character a great outing for this show, because ultimately we know where this show leads, we know where it's going to go, we know where this character's journey goes. So what can you do in a final season to really expand upon him and make him a character that is worth rooting for? So when you watch Rogue One, you have a different perspective around his character, that you can see those gray areas about him and understand why he would make these choices a lot more, versus him maybe feeling a little bit unlikable or feeling like the bad guy when you first see him in Rogue One, because he's not the focal point. It's Jyn Erso, who doesn't view him necessarily as the most heroic character around her. And so being able to have this show and the way that they kind of capture his character in the final season, I think does a great job of setting up what's to come in Rogue One. And I think that just in general, Diego Luna's performance is phenomenal here. As far as the other returning cast members, you have Genevieve O'Reilly once again as Mon Mothma, and she was fantastic in the first season, being given some of the best lines of dialogue and some of the best tension heavy sequences. But this is the season that really integrates her into the rebellion proper, and I think that it was interesting to see this character who is mainly dealing with the political side, she's mainly dealing with the speeches, who finds herself amidst some of the gunplay, some of the blaster plays, finds herself in some dangerous situations, finds herself privy to some of the dark things that the rebellion is doing to get things off of the ground that she's now part of, and she can't really fight it because she still believes in the rebellion. And so she's struggling with this, leaving this part of her life behind that is a little bit more luxurious, and seeing her kind of dive deeper into the rebellion. I think Genevieve O'Reilly has some of the best scenes in this entire season. Her performance is phenomenal from beginning to end, as it has been in previous installments of Star Wars featuring her. And yeah, I just think she was great in this show. I think they did a great job of giving Mon Mothma a really great character, because ultimately she was a small character in the original trilogy that of course was expanded upon in books and comics, and then of course Genevieve O'Reilly was going to play her in their prequels that ended up getting cut. It's a deleted scene, and for her to come back in Rogue One and play a big role there, and now have, you know, more time in some of the shows including Andor, and she was in of course Star Wars Rebels as well. They've really expanded on her character, and Mon Mothma has easily become just one of the better OG characters to kind of be expanded upon in modern day, most notably by a new actress in Genevieve O'Reilly. There are some great moments where you really get to see that duality of a life that was and the pretty life and what is, you know, the reality of what's going on outside of the rich and famous and their lifestyles. And I think she's just a great conduit for the audience to kind of see all of that through. You can really see the torment of the way that things weigh on her, and kind of the moments where she finds herself getting too in over her head with some of these moments. Stellan Skarsgard, of course, is back as the character of Luthen Rael. We get to get get flashbacks with his character, which expand upon him a little bit more, and most notably, you just get to see him continuing to do what he does. And I think for the most part, just like in the first season, Stellan Skarsgard is phenomenal in this season. He gave one of the best monologues in the last season, and so here he just gives another fantastic performance and is easily one of the most interesting characters over the course of the show. I just found it to be incredibly compelling, and again, a perfect character for that gray area. You know, like, you need what Luthen does to expand the rebellion. He's fighting for something bigger, and that oftentimes means him making choices that would ultimately, to other people, make him out to be a bad guy or a terrorist. And I really love that this show in general has done a good job of showcasing even the Empire's views of the rebellion and the notion that they aren't just these good guys across the board to everybody. We view them as the good guys. Of course, we know the Empire is doing substantially worse, so there has to be sacrifices, but there are good people who are taken out simply because they know information, and the rebellion can't risk getting this information into the wrong hands, or the fact that the Empire might know that that person told this person. They kind of have to make sure that they can't cut any corners. And I think that for the most part, this show really showcases, again, that gray area of the dark side to the rebellion, but ultimately the hope that's sitting on the other side. And a lot of that is seen through Luthen Rail, and I think Stellan Skarsgard just is always impressive as an actor, but in this show he's really captured a character that I think is going to be a memorable Star Wars character as time goes on. Maybe he won't be as flashy as a Luke Skywalker or Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, or anything like that, but he's definitely a really great character. They've done a really great job expanding upon his dialogue, his moments, his characterization to make him a very memorable character. Adria Arjona is back once again as the character of Bix Caleen, who is the love interest of Diego Luna's Cassian Andor. Now, in the first season, she has some key moments, most notably near the end of the season, but she is a character that I felt they didn't do enough with in the first season. And immediately jumping into this season, we get a lot more time with her in those first 3 episodes, and I think they do a lot more with her in this season. I think she gives a phenomenal performance, and she's an interesting character to kind of see through this whole experience, because I think overall this show gives us different perspectives of the building of this rebellion. The really tough ones, the ones who are willing to risk it all, those who aren't willing to risk it all, those who feel like they've risked it all already and they're getting tired of doing this. Is it even worth it? Or maybe it's somebody else's job to kind of take this on. And then in the case of the character of Biggs, you have this character who has gone through a lot. She was tortured in the first season. She has trauma from that. And she just doesn't have that fight in her the same way. She wants to stand alongside the rebellion. She wants to stand alongside Cassian. She wants to stand alongside those who are doing good to fight against the Empire. But she's dealing with trauma, PTSD. She's not feeling her best, and she kind of feels smothered by all of this because she was a victim amidst it all. She hasn't necessarily been able to be free in fighting and get away with every little incident. She was unfortunately under their thumb in the first season, and I think that she as a character is really interesting, and I think she as an actress brings so much to the role that really expands upon her character. I will say, as the season went on, they eventually make a decision around her character in the last chunk of the season that I don't necessarily know I loved. I felt like it ultimately made her character feel like they could have done more with her. She is one of the final characters we see in the season, and I think that they do something that could possibly leave doors open to some interesting storytelling later on, but I can't say that I necessarily loved what they did with her across the season. I love what they did with her across the first part of the season, and there's one of the darkest scenes in this show, and probably one of the darker real life things that we see from humans that happens in this show around her character in the first few episodes that I was actually surprised to see. It's the first time for Star Wars. I won't spoil it, but I will say a bit of a trigger warning that for anybody who is sensitive to some darker elements, this show definitely doesn't stray away from that. And so, yeah, I think there was a really great opportunity for her to be a big character across the whole season, and she was for the first half, but again, they do something with her in the latter half that I feel kind of pushes her to the side and ultimately kind of negates some awesome opportunities to make her a far better character. Then you have Kyle Soller and Denise Gough as the characters of Cyril Karn and Dedra Miro, and I really enjoyed their characters in the first season. Dedra, for me, has easily become one of my favorite Imperial characters of all time, and this season really helps solidify that. I think that Denise is a phenomenal actress, and she does a great job of showcasing that snarly, very conniving kind of mentality and that approach that an Imperial officer needs, and I think for the most part, she plays all of those things incredibly well. I thought that she was really menacing in this season, somebody who feels ruthless, but they do a great job of giving her some vulnerability, especially around the character of Cyril, because if you remember from the very end of the last season, they allude to the fact that there might be a little bit of a romance blooming there. And as we jump a year later into this season, right out of the gate, this isn't a spoiler, right out of the gate in the series, we see them in a little bit of a closer relationship, both her and Cyril. It's the first scene that you see them in. And so Cyril's in a different place too. He's gotten a promotion. He's a little bit higher up. He isn't just the pencil pusher who wants to do good for the Empire, or do good, I should say. But I really found that their dynamic was interesting because Cyril still has that part in him that he wants to be a bigger part of this, but it just kind of feels like he's being pushed aside. But he does have some great moments here. I thought the relationship between Cyril and Dedra created some interesting dynamics between the two characters and kind of put the two characters in a little bit more of a vulnerable state, especially the character of Dedra, because you have this person who in the first season was just this ruthless Imperial, and while she still has that element to her for sure in this season, there are a lot of moments in this season where we get to see her be a little bit more of a person, especially around her relationship with Cyril. And so yeah, easily huge standouts for the two of them. I think Dedra Meero will probably go down for me as some of the best Imperial writing for a specific character over the course of time. Of course, moving away from the big Sith characters or like some of the more iconic Star Wars villains, I think that she, for me, is starting to kind of edge her way up to being one of the most memorable and better written Imperial characters that we've seen across all of Star Wars. And I already mentioned you have Ben Mendelsohn in here as well, but it was great to see him. I just really want to highlight that I think that Orson Krennic was a fantastic inclusion to the season. He's not utilized throughout every single episode, but when he is utilized over the course of the season, it expands upon the building to Rogue One. But more than anything, I think that he's just great. He pops right back into the role. We get to see him a little bit more kind of vile, because when we see him in Rogue One, he feels like, you know, lower management kind of individual. We got, you know, Grand Moff Tarkin in that movie that kind of pushes him aside. He feels like somebody who wants to be bigger, and in this season we get to see him feeling like he is that bigger individual, because he's mainly dealing with Imperials who are lower than him. So he does have a lot more of a strong personality and a lot more of a strong presence in this season. And so it's really interesting to kind of see his character here and how that kind of really sets up who he is in Rogue One, and why he gets so frustrated when he has Moff Tarkin kind of pushing him to the side, why he's kind of chasing that approval from Lord Vader and from Emperor Palpatine. And so I thought that Ben Mendelsohn was fantastic in this season. It was great to see him jump back into the role, and I think he gives a fantastic performance without a doubt. All right, with all that said, I really enjoyed the season. I think that there's fantastic writing here. The visuals are great. This is running very long. I've just been rambling my thoughts. Visually, this show is phenomenal when it comes down to practical effects, set design, locations used, CGI. Overall, this is a pretty stunning show on a visual level. Outside of that, narratively, I think it's incredibly strong, and I have very minor gripes here and there that didn't necessarily work for me. A couple of things I felt like were a little bit undercut. A couple of side characters that were bigger characters in the first season that I feel are disposed of or just kind of put to the side very, very quickly. Most notably, one of those being B2 EMO. I really enjoyed B2 in the first season. I thought he was a cute character, but they don't do anything with him in this season. Not what I expected that they would do. He seemed like a character that was going to be alongside Cassian for a lot more of the journey, and ultimately feels like a character that was sidelined entirely in this season. And there are quite a few other characters that I felt that way about that were in the first season. And of course, because of the fact that these characters aren't characters that are seen again, and we're getting closer to Rogue One, which is already a movie that's about characters that die, you do have a lot of characters in this season that unfortunately are dispatched of at certain points that sometimes feels a little rushed. Like, it's like, oh man, I didn't expect that character to die here. I didn't expect this character to kind of get sidelined and pushed here because they're not part of what's really being set up. And so there was a little bit of that was a bit of a gripe. Now, one thing I do want to lean into as far as a big positive as well is the fact that there was a big criticism of the first season not having enough aliens, and this season has way more aliens. So if you are looking forward to having more aliens involved in the overall aesthetic of this show and having it feel a little bit more Star Warsy, they definitely listened to that criticism, and there's far more alien species across all these episodes that are around our human characters, which definitely elevated the experience and made it all feel far more Star Warsy. And so ultimately, I think Andor Season 2 is a phenomenal show that expands upon the characters from the first season in a great way for the most part, and does a great job of letting this be a great connective tissue to Rogue One. There's one last thing I want to talk about, and it's the inclusion of a character, a popular Star Wars character, that is recast. And I feel like I should tell certain people about it. Don't worry, it's not a character like a Luke Skywalker or Anakin Skywalker or something like that. It's no Han Solo, but it is a very popular Star Wars character that has been around since the prequel era. So this is your spoiler spoiler warning. If you don't want to know that this character appears, I think for the most part, most of you will know that this character is going to appear because we're getting close to Rogue One, and this character was in Rogue One. But I think it's important for fans to know that this character was recast. After watching the episodes, I couldn't find anything online about the fact that this character was recast. I couldn't find anything online about why the actor who had played this character over the course of the last couple decades had not come back to play him. I don't know if it was a scheduling conflict. I don't know if the actor has chosen just not to be a part of this franchise anymore. I really don't know. And so that is your spoiler warning, and this is what I'm going to wrap the video with. In this season, we get the return of the very famous Bail Organa, who of course is the adoptive father of Princess Leia, who was played by Jimmy Smits in the prequels and has returned in things like Obi-Wan Kenobi as well as Rogue One. We've seen this character in a lot of different Star Wars media, including some of the animated stuff where he's made to look like the OG actor Jimmy Smits. But when Senator Organa showed up and they called him Senator Organa, I was a little confused. I thought maybe this was his brother or something, because in this season he is played by Benjamin Bratt. And again, there is nothing I could find online as to this being announced, and I hate to be that guy who tells people this ahead of time, but that's why I gave the spoiler warning. But I think it's important for fans to know. I think it's something that's going to bother a lot of fans. As soon as I saw him pop up and they called him Bail eventually, it bothered me. It left me feeling like, why did they do this? I'm a big continuity nut. I couldn't help but watch and wonder why this was the case. I couldn't find anything online, and it distracted me in the episodes that he was in. And the episodes that feature Bail Organa in this season are top notch. I loved them. I thought they were some of the best episodes in the season, but it just ultimately left me wondering why. I couldn't help but want to look at my phone and try to discover answers in those episodes, and I couldn't find anything. And I'm looking forward to there being an announcement as to why, but I think there's going to be something that bothers a lot of fans. We have seen this actor play this character and even the animated stuff made to look like him since the 2000s, and to now have this character who has been reprised in things within the last decade not be here played by that actor who is still alive is crazy to me. Now, Benjamin Bratt is a fantastic actor. I've seen him in many things, and I think for the most part he does a really good job here capturing the cadence and mannerisms and the voice, speech pattern, and all of that of Bail Organa, played by Jimmy Smits. I think he's doing the absolute best he can, but I think there's going to be a lot of Star Wars fans who aren't necessarily as familiar with the character of Bail Organa by name, who may know him by face and be like, oh yeah, I know who that is. I know, what role he played in Star Wars. I know that he is Princess Leia's adoptive dad, but maybe immediately they're like, Bail Organa, which guy is that again? And I think that I got to keep in mind those kind of Star Wars fans who are going to watch something like this and be a little confused as to who this is. And then you're going to have the diehard Star Wars fans who easily know who he is that are going to be confused and going to want to look at their phone and try to find an answer as to why this actor is no longer playing this character. It was a big bummer for me, and without a doubt, in a whole season that was fantastic, with a show that was so good, with a season of television that's some of the best Star Wars of all time, I just can't believe and can't understand why they would recast a character that people love so much. And so that's going to be my thoughts on Andor season 2. Overall, a fantastic season of television that does a great job of expanding upon what was in the first season and rolling into Rogue One. I'm going to miss these characters. I'm going to miss this show. While not every character beat and everything they do with every character from the first season was my favorite, while I wish there was a little bit more K2SO, while I wish they would have done more with B2, overall, I found this to be a really strong, tense, drama-filled season of Star Wars that is easily amongst some of the best written modern day Star Wars without a doubt, and it makes me love Rogue One all that much more. I think if you've been on the fence about Andor, it's only 2 seasons of television that I ultimately think are top tier Star Wars storytelling, and I would just say in general, I think our top tier storytelling in general. If you like a more mature story, if you've maybe struggled with certain newer Star Wars stories because they feel a little bit more lighter or don't feel like they take it to that next level of darkness and grit, Andor is your show. This is the adult HBO-esque series of Star Wars, and I'm just absolutely in love with it. I can't wait for the episodes of this season to roll out and for people to have their conversations and commentary on the show. And so I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say down below. So are you looking forward to Andor season 2? Did you like the show? Did you not like the show? Whenever you're watching this video, I look forward to hearing all of your thoughts. A big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos and early reviews like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. May the Force be with you.